Welcome to this tactical analysis. We're going to have a look at Manchester United's 2-3 or 2-4 deep build-up versus Arsenal's 4-4-2 or 4-3-3 and later 4-2-2-2 press, as well as also how Manchester United committed more in the second half and Arsenal's focus on quick transitions. After some successful counter pressure by the Arsenal players, Ruben Moy receives the ball here and looks to pass it into Walty, but due to pressure by Russo, who was tireless all game, the pass is sloppy and Manchester United are able to regain possession. Manchester United absolutely dominated the first half, it must be said, possibly helped by a quite liberal referee, but especially by Arsenal's extremely direct long ball play from their centre-backs and goalkeeper for Blackstenius running into the channels, almost as if they were trying to mimic Chelsea's Kerr running into the channels versus United. But this style is very boom or bust, often gifting United back possession. A bit of counter pressure here by the Arsenal players, but because they never quite go touch tight to Zellum, she's able to pirouette through them and retain possession. You can also see here Manchester United's 2-4 shape, which alternated between a 2-4 and a 2-3, where Zellum and Ladd would alternate as CDM or number 8. Manchester United were looking typically to try and pass up the wide area with the near-sided forward dropping to try and link with the fullback, and then the number 8s in TuneIn, who's higher up here on the left-hand side, looking to try and exploit the fact that Reuter here has tracked the forward dropping, could exploit the space that Arsenal had left centrally. This was either due to the positioning of a narrow forward such as Paris, but then also where the fullback successfully passed into the dropping forward and they were able to combine with the number 8, then Russo was a great option as he could fire the ball into her feet, and with the space created by a fullback pushing high to track a forward, and the fact that Russo loves to take a really nice first touch into space rather than stopping the ball dead, it allowed her to exploit the fact that the fullback had pushed high by running into that space herself, by laying it off into a supporting forward or switching it out potentially into a fullback. Arsenal are able to force a retreat out of Manchester United, and we see part of what is a 4-4-2 or a 4-3-3 shape. Initially, Arsenal will have their midfield four with Blackstenius and Marnham as the two centre forwards, looking to screen the central area and entice Manchester United into playing into a wide area. And then as United play the ball down one side, the far-sided forward will try and narrow, whilst the likes of Marnham or Blackstenius will try and cover whoever of the Manchester United CDMs has stayed deeper, so that Arsenal can pin United against a touchline. Of course, with that kind of shape, that then left the far-sided fullback for Manchester United in acres of space. Okay, so quickly here we can see part of that 2-3 shape where Batty is really high up on this right hand side. Zellum is dropping back to try and support the deep build-up. Marnham's bending her run so that it's not easy to pass into Ladd, and this kind of shows why I was calling a 4-3-3. After a bit of luck with Blundell driving inside, Zellum is able to switch the ball out into Batty, and she has just a ton of space to run into. You see it on both sides, but Manchester United forward here has narrowed, forcing McCabe to stay with her, which in turn forces Food to have to track and defend against Battier. Just at the bottom of the screen here as well is Zellum, who would try and get up. So in that 2-3 shape or 2-4 build up by United, Zellum would typically be the one looking to push up into a more attacking position, whilst Ladd would take up more of counter-pressing position. Briefly here you can see an alternative shape by Manchester United where Blundell has pushed into more of a CDM position and Ladd has pushed to a right back position, as Honor Battier has pushed really high here. Later in the game, Battier and Blundell work with Zellum and Ladd to fill the CDM positions such that they build up in a 3-2 shape where typically Ladd and Zellum will be the ones in the CDM positions and the far-sided fullback will end up in the third centre-back position, but the near-sided fullback will end up in a more attacking position. But they rotated who was in a CDM position, obviously depending on how possession was building up. You could also end up with a 3-1 where one of the two CDMs would try and push higher to support build-up and maybe provide a deep cross or shot, etc. Eventually Manchester United are forced to reset to their 2-4 midfield shape. See here Galton pulling inside, and as she's been tracked by her fullback, that creates space for Blundell out here on the left hand side. Good to also notice that Mead had to come inside as well, partially influenced by the movement of Galton. Notice here Toon far side holding a right wing position, whereas now we've got Paris also in a right wing position. But this was kind of Toon's role all game. She was constantly floating, constantly looking for just difficult to pick up positions, but especially her, Paris and Russo could be flexible in their positions, sometimes swapping So again, Manchester United somewhat reset into that 2-4 shape versus Arsenal's 4-4-2. And despite all the players that they have here, Arsenal are not able to put any pressure on Lads such that she's able to turn in here and eventually play the ball out towards the right hand side. But notice also here, Paris essentially becoming a CAM now, what with Toon holding the width on the far side. So eventually the ball gets out to Toon and she looks to drive inside whilst her near side fullback overlaps her. Paris moves from a central position and tries to drag Volti away to create space for Toon to run into. And then you can see here Zelen trying to push higher whilst Lad moves to her counter pressing position. And with Food driven as far back as she was by the run of Battier, it made it really difficult for her to then press Lad here. So Manchester United's advantage that they were building now allows Paris to be able to receive in between the lines here, creating a 2v1 out here versus McCabe. Now in the 72nd minute, Arsenal are building up in a 2-2 shape rather than a 2-1 where they just had Volti as the holding midfielder. And so Manchester United altered their press such that it wasn't a 4-4-2 with Toon higher up and then her trying to track Volti as Arsenal committed to one side, at which point then Rousseau would try and put pressure and hound that centre back. Instead now we have a 4-1-4-1 with Zelen pushing higher. Arsenal try to push their fullbacks really high up to try and support their wide midfielders, and they'd have their centre backs and goalkeeper switch the play to try and release the ball for the fullback and wide midfielder. Earlier in the game they tried to play a lot more long balls for Blackstenius or maybe Marnham to chase earlier in the game. Instead of Marnham here you'd have Knobs dropping to try and help link play. So we see here Ruben Moyes attempted to switch out towards this left hand side, get intercepted by Paris, who plays a beautiful immediate pass for Rousseau to start a counter attack for Manchester United. And so after Rousseau's cross was defended back post, McCabe clears the ball and we have Miedemar contesting versus Hayley Ladd. Oh no, also Zelem's position, how we mentioned that the far-sided fullback could tuck inside slightly and the near-sided fullback could try and push high up on her side. This sort of long ball though was difficult for Arsenal to retain, especially given the aggression from the likes of Hayley Ladd or Laetitia. Arsenal end up with a free kick and some quick thinking by Food releases Miedemar in this left-hand side channel. Earlier in the game this run would have been made by the likes of Blackstenius or Marnham, looking to get into that left-hand side or right-hand side channel and then whipping across for forward supporting. Again, this being why I draw comparisons with the Chelsea game where Kerr did this routine to devastating effect. Okay, Manchester United building up in a 4-1 against what is essentially a 4-2-2-2 where you have your two centre forwards for Arsenal and then your wide midfielders are staying relatively narrow, with Walty and Marnham being expected to track the number 8s. And so you see that here with Marnham looking to try and put a bit of pressure on Hayley Ladd whilst Walty is tracking the movement here of Toon. Note here also Garcia, who's dropped, and with her, Weinreuter has tracked her, which is a pattern we mentioned from earlier in the game. And then also you've got your forward narrowing, which earlier in the game was turning that 4-4-2 into somewhat of a 4-3-3 and leaving the far-sided fullback for Manchester United free. Arsenal were able to successfully win the ball back in this right-hand side channel and release Marnham, looking to try and get into a crossing position and cross for numbers. Notice here, Walty as well on the edge of the box. Similar to how we had for the Weinreuter goal, her pushing high up with then a ladder to then also contest the cross when it was eventually played in, but more likely she's there to put counter pressure. After Millie Turner's head injury, Garcia here was able to drop off and was left unmarked as Toon had occupied Weinreuter, and with Mead as high as she was early during the press, Garcia is given a ton of time to try and pick out a long ball, and so she plays that long pass for Rousseau as well as now Thomas to contest. I want to highlight that there's similarities here with Thomas's narrow position to Galton's narrow position earlier in the game, in that in this narrow position, if the likes of Rousseau was able to actually win this ball, she'd be very near to try and contest a cross or potentially be played in early. And so from the ensuing throw-in after Ruben's clearance and a bit of wide combination play between Garcia and Toon, Zelen tries to fire an audacious ball here centrally for Rousseau to contest. Note how high the fullbacks are for Manchester United, so that's the narrow position of the near side forwards, and Miedemar trying to do Marnham's CAM defensive role from earlier. The clearance is clean but aimless, so United get the ball back immediately, and then from there, without quite the same intensity in Arsenal's press, Manchester United are able to switch the play towards the right hand side to take advantage of the fact that Arsenal's covered towards their left. They noted how many Manchester United players are committing forwards. Manchester United are obviously behind at this point. And so continuation of that play with Battier overlapping Thomas as she drives inside. We've got Ladd high up playing as number 8 with Zelen just off screen looking to try and support, and numbers in the box. Anna Battier was given responsibility to wipe across into the box for the forwards in and on the edge of the box to contest, but as she loses possession, she looks to start a counter press. And so we see here Battier successfully regaining possession from that counter press as Arsenal sought to try and play through the pressure rather than over it, which had previously lost them the ball immediately. And with that, thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed this content, consider sharing it on social media, subscribing, having a look through the playlist. And with that, we're out.